success, ambition, that is my peak value. What is being a great leader? Being a great leader is, I was the rebellious, the ambitious, the driven, but I certainly wasn't compassionate. Can you have balance? Can you have it all? Of course you can't. I've been in these situations and I've come out and I've gone, why have I felt really awkward from this meeting? It's all about winning. Being a sports team, you have to be quick, you have to be nimble, and you have to sacrifice a lot. Took me into a room and she said, Jules, you're just really grumpy. That was all I needed. It was that one moment. And then I just thought, oh, wow. I was stressed about decisions. I was catastrophizing. I was ruminating, all of that stuff. And I thought that was normal.
My name is Kyla Colvin. You're listening to my conversation with Julia George, and this is the Hunger and Heart Podcast. Enjoy the show. Hello, my name is Kyla Colvin, and welcome to episode 8 of Hunger and Heart, a podcast on the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. My guest today is Julia George. Julia works in one of the most competitive environments in the world. She is Director of Partnerships at Red Bull Racing and Red Bull Technology. In this conversation, we talk about how to thrive in an environment that is all about winning, and we also talk about what you have to sacrifice. So here it is, my conversation with Julia George. Welcome to Hunger and Heart. What's your experience with wild ambition and fierce compassion?
Firstly, a huge thanks for having me on. Super pleased to be talking to you about this, a very passionate topic of mine. And I think knowing that this question was going to be asked, I had to do a bit of a deep dive into actually, does this resonate with me? So fierce ambition, totally. If you ask anyone, ambition, I've always been a super ambitious person. The word compassion, I don't necessarily identify with. So
Amazing.
when I had to kind of think why, I looked into like, what is compassion? And it means to suffer together, so that you're feeling other people's suffering and you're kind of taking that on yourself, right? And you're motivated to relieve that suffering. And that's not me. That's not me. And again, I wonder if a lot of that is built, I've done work on values and your belief system, and I know that a lot of it is built from when you're young. And in my family, there's 3 kids. The eldest, typical eldest, he was the responsible one, is the responsible one. He went into the army, the military, typical first child. Second child, typical second child, my sister, nurse. She was the caring and compassionate one. Me, typical third child, I was the rebellious, the ambitious, the driven, the naughty, but I certainly wasn't compassionate. That was not me. That was reserved for my sister. So whether or not that has been part of probably why I don't identify with being compassionate. And it's sort of stuck with me, that word. But I guess when you look at the question of fiercely ambitious and probably being a great leader, yes. And what is being a great leader? Being a great leader is having integrity, being transparent, being true to your ethics and morals. And that totally, that coexists together. But it's quite funny that word compassionate is not me, does not resonate with me. And like I said, you ask any one of my team and they will probably laugh and say, Julia is absolutely not compassionate in the true sense of the word.
Okay, I love this so much. I'm so I was already excited for this conversation, and now I'm like 10 times as excited for this conversation. Okay, so talk to me about how you deal with your team when they are facing challenges, when they have to get their heads in the game, when they're struggling. Like, how do you deal with that? How do you get them through those times?
So again, it's not necessarily about my values and imposing that on them. So I think there's a lot of work to be done around how different people are and what drives them. And what drives me is very different to what drives the rest of my team. So I've done a lot of work on actually getting everyone's values and actually, if you look at my career, a lot of the teams I've gone into at a point where they've actually needed rebuilding. They've needed complete restructure and rebuilding. And actually, a lot of that is due to the fact that, they're not happy because they don't really have a vision. They don't know what they're working towards. There's no communication. There's no sense of team. There's no meaning, I think. And so a lot of the work that I've done within rebuilding these teams is actually getting group values together. Yes. So what do we all sign up and adhere to? So I've done a lot of work within my team, and that helps in these situations, because we go back to the values and it's like, look, one value is actually don't be a dickhead. We took that from an All Black value, actually. Another value is, having each other's backs, and another value is integrity, and all of this sort of stuff. So that helps when we're going through these tough times, or when someone's going through a really, let's say, challenging time at work. I really go back to what is their values, what are our values, rather than me imposing how I work and what I do. I find that helps much more the individual.
Okay, so let's say, for example, that my personal values are integrity and love. Those are my actual values. So let's say my values are integrity and love, and let's say our team values are don't be a dick and have each other's backs. And let's say that I am, trying to perform, but for whatever reason, just not getting it right. And you have to have a conversation with me. How would you integrate my personal values, how would you recognize my personal values, your personal values, and the values that we've agreed to as a group?
Sometimes it's difficult, because your values, like integrity and love, right? My values is very much like straightforwardness. So automatically we might have a friction, because I'll go in super blunt and be like, right, Kayla, what's up? Tell me, let me fix it. And you'll be a bit more of the sort of softness, and actually I want to find a connection, and this is my struggle here. And so already you've got a bit of a friction there. So it's knowing what values you have and knowing what my values are and where that friction might come together, right? And so I think it's understanding what is that friction within your value that you're not getting when you're working. And so if your value is love and connection, then what are we doing as a team that there's a friction there? And how do we ensure that you are coming into things but still being true to yourself? So you're still coming into things and being able to be warm and friendly and nice and have that connection with people, so you feel like you're getting something out of it. And that's challenging, because sometimes you might be in a culture, and I've been in cultures before where, another one of my values is around zest and adventurous. And I've been in cultures before where there's no zest. There's no, like, it's very straightforward. The culture is very, I would say, serious. And I've been in these situations and I've come out and I've gone, why have I felt really awkward from this meeting? And it's because the culture of the company and my culture is there's friction there. But I think how I help in those situations is it's almost knowing that. And if you know that, then you can go, oh, that's why I felt really uncomfortable. Okay, I get that. And I think a lot of the time I think throughout my career, and I see this in a lot of people, you try and mold to what the culture of the company is or what the culture of the people are, and that's what makes you feel really uncomfortable. But if you try and be you and be authentic you, even in a culture that is not the same as you, at least you'll feel like you're more comfortable in your own skin. You're kind of coming out of those meetings, or you'll come out of that event or whatever your project you're doing, and you'll feel good about it because you've still been you. And I think that is how I try and work with the team, at least, so that they're still being their authentic selves in every situation, right?
Would your team say that you care about them?
Interesting. Yes, they would. It's just the word compassion. But
Okay.
but yes, caring, yes, but I would do it in my own way, in a very straightforward, no bullshit, like that's
Yeah.
the way I would do it. So it doesn't come across in the softness, I guess.
I'm loving this conversation so much. So my values are integrity and love, and I love that the way that landed for you was that there's going to be a softness there,
Hmm.
and that there might be a friction with straightforwardness. And my team will tell you, like, I'm the straightforward. Like, I'm just just tell me what is actually going on, and I just want to talk to you about what's actually going on. And to me, that is absolutely an expression of love. Like, if I care for you, then the mark of my caring for you is that I'm not going to pretend that things are other than how they are. And so I find the thing I find so fascinating about this conversation is one of the things I always say when I'm like teaching this stuff is our words are only ever an imperfect map, and the map is not the territory. And what it sounds like to me is that you and I are in the same territory and using maybe a different map to describe it. Would that be, do you think,
Totally.
does that resonate for you? I see you nodding. Does that resonate for you?
Totally, because I think what you're saying is one word can actually mean so many different things. And it's the description of what you mean by that word. So again, your love, you might have a description that's like caring and I want to be honest with people and straightforward and all of that. But when I take the word love, I'm taking it in the very traditional sense. I'm like, okay, that's not me. So totally, totally. It's diving into those words and that meaning behind it.
I love this. I love this. And of course, I have a very long story that I'm not going to tell now about what love means for me. But the short version is what love means for me is like, what does it mean to do everything with love? What does it mean to craft our events with love for our participants? What does it mean to care, to show love to you when you're coming to this podcast, in the way that we communicate with you, in the way that we make your life easy, in the way that we support you to be excellent on this? But like that's my interpretation of it. But like you say, it doesn't, that's not the meaning. That's the way it applies to me in my role. And so I find this really fascinating because the way that I'm hearing you describe yourself as a leader, the words I would use would be absolutely care for your team. And what I'm next curious about, because if we set aside the word compassion, which is not you have a visceral reaction to it. Excellent. We set aside the word love. That's not you. You have a visceral reaction to it. Excellent. But what I do hear you say is wild ambition, like huge ambition. You're operating at the highest level of one of the most competitive, in one of the most competitive environments on the planet. And you're bringing with that a total attentiveness to who is on your team and what do they need in order to perform. And that is the intersection. If we set the specific words we're using to describe it aside, that's the intersection I'm most interested in, is what does it look like to care for people in such a way that they can deliver with the highest level of stress, pressure, tension, ambition. How do we set people up so that they can thrive in those environments and so they don't fall over and just suffer? So
Yeah.
thoughts on
So it's quite hard in the environment I'm in. And I'll tell you why. Because not only are we a sports team, we are, a highly successful sports team. We're not, and I say us because yes, I come from Red Bull, which is a brand and a product, but we are a part of that. So we are a sports team first and foremost. That's what we focus on. And that's very different from working in any other company or corporate company, because what you're chasing is success on on the track, you're not necessarily chasing brand success. You're not necessarily chasing sales. It's all about winning. And that brings a very different culture and environment than, let's say, a big global corporate brand that has certain processes and, approval systems and all of the stuff that comes with that. Being a sports team, you have to be quick, you have to be nimble, and you have to sacrifice a lot. And the reason I say that is because we are out traveling, the traveling team, there's 24 races, so you're constantly traveling. And when you're not traveling, you have to be on. You have to be on at weekends because we're racing. So there is not the same, let's say, balance that you could potentially have, which I don't necessarily believe in so much of this balance word, but there is very less of that in this environment because you have to be on. And the people in my team, they're traveling, they're working, they're starting the week on Monday, and they might go to a race on Wednesday. And when they're at a race, they're working 12 hours a day, and then they're out in the evenings looking after the partners or the events that we're doing, and then they're back up after 5 hours sleep, and then they go on into the race, and then they fly home on the Monday, and then they come back to work on the Tuesday, and they do it all again. And that's tough because you have exhaustion and you have emotions are high, and you're in an environment also where you're always on and the pressure is constantly here. So it's a challenge. It's a real challenge because you can't really, I don't say you can't look at it like at other companies. Yes, you can implement a lot of things that help in self-care, and that's why I've been very very interested in ensuring that we all treat each other well, that we have values that we adhere to, so that when that pressure is there, and that's most of the time, and when you're traveling and you're exhausted and you're tired, you can go back to those values. And actually, if you were a bit horrible to someone, you'd be like, sorry, I was the dickhead. Sorry, I'm calling you out. And so I think with that environment, it is very important to have values, but it's also very important to have forgiveness and realize that it's a very high pressure, different environment than most places and most companies.
So again, I'm just so fascinated by this whole thing. So a lot of this podcast is about what it takes to be a high performer. And consistently, the message that comes through is that there is no balance there. That if you are committed to doing something wildly ambitious, whether that's in Formula One, whether that's being, the All Blacks aiming to win a World Cup, whether that's, at FIFA, whatever it is, that this is the game. The game is you're going to show up on Monday. You're going to be at the track for 12 hours. You're going to be with the partners at night. You're going to get 5 hours of sleep, and then you're going to come back and do it all over again. This is what you're signing up for. And so one of the things that the myths that we're kind of tackling on this podcast is that a lot of people, I think of well-being. A lot of people, the way that this plays out is that people think of work is horrible, and well-being is the thing you do to go away to recover from the horrible thing that is work. And so you go and you do yoga, or you practice mindfulness, or you touch grass, or whatever it is, right? And what has been coming through from a number of the guests that we've had on this podcast, I want to test this with you and get your take on it, is that actually when you're committed to high performance and when you get joy from high performance, that the well-being piece of it and the care piece of it is, what do I need to do in order to be able to perform consistently at that level? Whether you're the driver or the person looking after the partners or whatever it is, how do you deal with that in your environment? How do you think about well-being such that the people who are there getting 5 hours of sleep are able to continue to perform and deliver at that level over time and sustain it? Or is it not sustainable? Do they last 6 months and burn out, or a year and burn out?
There's a lot in this. There's a lot. So I think, firstly, to tackle something you said again really resonated with me about, you're being in a job and it sucks you, and then you need like self-care to get yourself ready for the job and come back to it. And if that's the case, I think you're in the wrong job. And like, I have been there. I've been in a number of jobs that, not the job was wrong, like necessarily. It's not that you're there and you're like, oh, it's just something doesn't connect. And whether it's the culture, I found myself in agency life, and agency life is hard. And I remember sort of almost getting to a point of the end of one of the agencies, and I was there for about 4 years. And actually, I think I was just so traumatized, not from anything particular, but just the stress and I was on heightened stress really for probably about 4 years, and that takes its toll on your body. And in that situation, I was exactly what you said. I was like dragging myself from day to day. I was stressed about decisions. I was catastrophizing. I was ruminating, all of that stuff. And I thought that was normal. I was like, but this is what it is in a stressful, high performing job. This is normal. I've just got to get used to it. I've got to figure out how I can deal with stress. So I was kind of doing exercise a lot, and in the weekends I was just dead. Like I would do nothing. And only when I found this role, which is within a company that allows you to be your authentic self, allows you to be you, respects you for your decisions, allows you to perform and do what you need to do. And again, it works for me. It might not have worked for other people. I'm not suggesting that. But when you find a place where, honestly, where it's more about where you can be you and be totally comfortable being you, because then you're not second guessing. Then you're not going, oh God, is that decision okay? Is that the right decision? Oh, what are they going to think about if I do this? Oh, and you're constantly again second guessing, catastrophizing, and worrying. And when you have a role that you're not having that constantly in your head, then you're in the right place, whatever that job might be. And so that's the first part of the question. I think the second part of the question around, in high performing roles, can you have balance? Can you have it all? Of course you can't. I think, can you have it all? No, like this just doesn't exist. No one can have it all. Like you can't. You have to choose what you want in life, and whatever you want, you have to sacrifice something. And it's funny because I've only really in the last probably couple of years realized that. I've wanted a social life. I've wanted to see my friends. I've wanted to go on holiday all the time. I've wanted to go home and see my family. I've wanted to have like the perfect relationship with my husband. I've like lived the social media life of like sucking everyone else in and being like, I want that. And it's funny because when you actually let that go and say, actually, that's not true, and I can't have it all, something has to sacrifice. And if you actively choose what you are sacrificing, then you're a lot more free. And in this role, because there's all the travel and you're constantly away and you're working and you're traveling, I've had to sacrifice seeing my friends. I don't see my friends. And they know that. And again, if they're a true friend, that's okay. I might see them once a year, twice a year. But now that I've actively sacrificed that, I'm free because I'm not going, oh my God, I've got to catch up with this person and I've got to see this and I know what I'm focused on, and I'm okay with that. And I'm focused on my work, and that's what drives me. And again, back to my values of success is a big thing for me in terms of my peak value. So that's okay. And I know that a time will come when something will shift, and then I'll probably go, right, now my focus is more on, building the relationships in my life and things like that. So I have actively sacrificed that and I'm comfortable with it. And then I think the third part to the question, which was more around balance, I do think you can have balance, but balance is different from having it all. You can't have it all, but I think you can have balance. And what balance is again looking at what you need in terms of you and your values in your life. So one of my values is about having kind of calm and stillness. And so for me, I do not sacrifice exercise because I need that in my life. And I ensure that I focus on health. So I go to my acupuncturist weekly and I make sure I have that. And I, make sure that I'm taking my supplements and I'm seeing a doctor for things like that. So that for me is balance, and that I don't sacrifice. So I think you can, in the degree of balance, depending on how you look at it, have that, because you need to look after yourself. So that the answer to that is true. You have to look after yourself to be able to thrive in a high performing environment. Because if you don't, then yeah, you will burn out.
Amazing. I'm so down for all this. Okay, so I want to pick up on all those three threads. So the first one, what I want to reflect back what I heard you say, because I find it fascinating. You talked about being in this environment where you were not thriving, and it was this super high stress environment, and now you are in arguably one of the highest stress environments on the planet, and you're thriving. It sounds like. I'm interpreting that you're thriving. And what I heard you say is the difference between position one and position two is not that there's less stress in position two. The difference is that in your current role, you feel able to be yourself, and in your previous role, you did not. Is that fair to say?
Totally. I think there's also a piece of learning as well, learning and experience. And so being able to be true to who you are and being embraced for being you is so empowering, because the more you are you, the more you're comfortable, the more you don't doubt yourself, the more you don't doubt your decisions. And again, it's taken me a long time to get to that. I've had a coach, I've had work on it, I've had work on my values, because actually coming from New Zealand and then moving to the UK, everyone thinks, oh, similar cultures, it's fine. You speak English. You're one of, you're originally from England, probably at some stage, and there's a truth in that. But actually, culturally, it's incredibly different, incredibly different. And when I look at New Zealand culture, we're very down to earth. We're relaxed, we're fair, there's an equality piece. And that actually comes out a lot in my values. And again, having done work on that, I realize actually I am who I am, obviously, because of the culture that I was brought up in and born into, obviously. But you don't realize at the time, because you grow up in your culture and you are who you are and you're friends with who you are, and it just all becomes normal. And only when you're put into a completely different culture do you realize that you're like, I'm not like them. Oh, do I need to be more like them? And so in my first role, I was in an agency that was the thriving London PR agency. It was fashion. It did all the fashion shows and it did beauty brands, and it was in Kensington. And I remember just going, I don't know any of these brands. I don't talk like these people. I am so different. And I struggled and I tried to be more like these people who I was with. And and probably for for a year at least, I think I really tried to sort of be something who I wasn't. And it just didn't work. I felt sort of out of place. I was eagerly looking up to all these, British people who knew all these hotel brands and wearing glamorous bags and all of this thing. And I'm like, I'm this Kiwi girl and I'm not from this background. And it was actually interesting because at that point, I the company was amazing. So the company I didn't have an issue with. I loved the founder and she was great and she had a very a firm belief of ethos and doing things in the right way. So I loved where I worked. I just was literally stuck out. And I remember people even saying, you need to change your emails. Instead of hi, you need to write dear and you need to write best and, maybe tone down your accent a bit and all of this. And
What?
and and I don't think that there was no bad meaning behind it. It was just that was how things were run. And I remember at that point there was also a lot of work on values. So they were great. They brought in this company that supported on values, and it's the same coach I've had since then up until now. And I've worked with her over the years, and only recently have we looked back and said, "Do you remember back then when you were trying to be something that you're not?" And actually, from that point, since I've learned about being true to yourself, I've actually honed that up. I've been more Kiwi than ever. I'm more straightforward. I'm more like colloquial. I'm super informal. And that's me. And I've noticed that breaks through this culture that is in Britain that is very formal, and actually they love it because they're like, oh gosh, who is this? Who is this friendly, informal person that's super straightforward that's telling me like how it is? So yes, I think we've gone round in a circle, and I'm trying to even remember the first question, but it was something
I love
about
it.
being authentic. And so yes, I think when you get more comfortable and you understand that helps you in your culture rather than trying to fit in, you will find a place that allows you to be you. And not everyone is a cookie cutter, and I say that to my team. You're not all cookie cutters, so please be you, and you be you, and we'll enjoy all these differences and we'll thrive.
Mhm. I love this. Like, I told you my two values are integrity and love. The word integrity comes from the Latin word integrare, which literally means to make whole. And the way I think about that is like that there is no friction between my thoughts, my emotions, and my words and my actions, that all of those things are in total alignment. And so I'm not saying things that are misaligned with what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking. I'm not putting myself to be someone who is not who I am inside. But I do just want to come back to this is a little detour. But you mentioned about moving to UK and feeling like, oh well, it's similar culture and speak English, whatever. I had like almost that exact thought when I moved to New Zealand. I came here and I was like, how hard is it going to be? Like, English speaking, developed country, like I'm pretty gregarious, like, surely it took me a good year to really settle in. And the things that were hard were things that felt like so silly with how small they were, but just there was this constant, like, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, or I don't understand what that means, or what word is that, or whatever. And I remember like I would come home. We had a log burner, like a wood stove in the house, which is really common here, but not where I come from. And I would come home and I'd be freezing, and I'd put on a sweater and I'd still be freezing. I'd put on another sweater, and then my then husband would come home and he'd go, "Why didn't you light the fire?" And I'd be like, "Light the fire? What am I, a fucking Girl Scout? I'm from New York City. I don't know how to light a fire." And like this thing of like, I just don't know how I'm supposed to be in this environment, and it took so long to settle in. And then once I settled in, it's been great. But I talk constantly with people who are new to the country, who are going, it's great, and it just feels a little bit hard. I remember going out for dinner one night. I'd been here for maybe 8 or 10 months, and there was a couple there from the States. and we're sitting at dinner, and I made a little joke that came from a show called Saturday Night Live. And I was sitting opposite this guy who's from the US, who I didn't really know very well. And he was like, "Oh, Chris Farley," like the guy who'd made that I was referencing. And I was like, oh, like I felt so seen. This ridiculous, silly joke. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm home again. What? This is so great. So I really just want to like reinforce everything you're saying about being true to yourself, and that ties directly to that second comment that you made, which was the thing about actively sacrificing, which is one of the things that I think we get stuck on. Is we feel like we don't have a choice, or we feel stuck, or we feel like we want to have all the things and we can't have all the things. So we're kind of fighting against ourselves and against the laws of physics in not being able to have all the things. And your comment about going, not only this is who I am, but this is how I choose to live my life. And I am not going to apologize for being just unashamedly ambitious and going after what I want, and recognizing that that means that I am not going to have the kind of social life that other people might have or choose. And that is my deliberate choice, and being able to be at peace with that. Do you find that the people on your team struggle with that as well? Is that something that you lead them to do? Like, how do you support them to make those kinds of deliberate choices?
Yeah. So I think let's break that question down, because firstly, I think the question of, I know that's me. So again, like I say, success, ambition, that is like my peak value. I know that. And actually we laugh about it. Me and my husband, my husband actually says, I know you put work first. He always says there's a pecking order. There's like work, then there's maybe like my family, then the cats, and then maybe him. And we laugh. But I mean, it's not true, but there's almost a sense of it that he knows that's what drives me, and he's okay with it too. And, and so it's being true and being unashamedly fine with that's what drives me, and knowing that that's what drives me. I think as a leader, I'm also very aware, because I know that's what drives me. My expectations of my team are super high, and I realize that, and I know that. And so, there is this always on. I'm expecting the team to be always on because I'm always on. And so I understand that that is a challenge for them. That doesn't mean I change what I do and I change who I am, but I think there's an awareness and an understanding. So I'll say to them, look, I get it. I know it can be tough. I know my expectations are high. I know sometimes I can be suffering or suffocating. I think that the second part of that question is, how do I support the team in this, I guess, always on culture, right? And sacrifice. And actually, I don't think that's my role. My role is not for the team to say, you need to do self-care and you need to figure out how you can get through this type of role. My job for the team is, I am setting the tone, I'm setting the values, I'm setting the culture, I'm making sure that everyone knows what we're working towards. I'm allowing them time. I'm allowing them to have that self-care time. For example, if someone has there's people in the team who have kids and they need to go home earlier and come in at a different time, and there's no expectations from, I'm like, do what you got to do, I trust you. So there's a trust. But I think when it comes to being able to look after yourself and know what drives you and be true to your values, I will give you that platform. But then it's up to the individual to work within that platform that's given. That's not necessarily my role.
I feel like there is a piece there that is, you're in a high performance environment, and people who join you in that environment, before they even walk through the door, they're coming in with an expectation that this is a high performance environment. And not every organization is a high performance environment. Like that's just a fact. And we had a thing at BOMA, at my organization, where we don't call them organizational values. We call them behavioral aspirations, because we want to be able to measure them and observe them. And we articulated them in the first instance, which was years ago. And we really we kind of over-indexed on the care part. We focused on, we want this to be an awesome place to work, where you feel like you can be your full self and where you're supported to be at your best, and rah, rah. And we redid them last year. And we were like, oh, this place is actually not for everybody. Like, if you are not ambitious, if you're not willing to constantly be like looking at your own performance and trying to learn and grow and understand what you've done, what you could do better, and to have like super high expectations, you're actually not going to have a good time here. This is going to be a very uncomfortable place for you. And so what I've certainly learned from this is the value of being hyper clear on those expectations helps others work out whether this is the right environment for them. Is that what I'm hearing from you when you say, I don't see my role as take care of people? Like, people come in here, I'm going to set these expectations. They're going to be sky high. And I'm coming into organizations like Red Bull Racing. Of course, that's consistent with what my expectations would be, that of course your expectations are sky high. So do people come in already kind of like open to that and prepared for that?
I would like to think yes, because you're coming into, like you say, a sports team, and a high performing sports team. So yes, and of course you would imagine, the number of applicants we get for even one role is in the hundreds, and sometimes more, because everyone sort of wants to work within this environment. And there probably is a time scale to it, because there's only so long you can be on the road and travel and have that lifestyle. Having said that, I think there are a lot of people within Formula One who have been in it for about 20 years and have been on the road, and that's just their life. And they're used to it. So they've come in at, age 18, and, 20 years later, they're still doing the same thing, and they've built their life around it. So I think there is a norm to it, and it becomes the norm, but you have to love it, right? You have to love it. And I see that more within the race team. So when I mean race team, you've got your engineers and the race team in terms of the mechanics. And yes, a lot of them have been in for years and years. I think when you come into a role, and we class ourselves as the marketing division of it, you've got a lot of young people. And actually, regardless of any place I think you go into, young people now don't see careers as this sort of step ladder that just goes up and up and up. It's like they'll do something for maybe even 6 months to a year, and then they'll be like, right, where else can I go, and what else can I do? And I think in my career it was very much like, right, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to get stuck in, and I'll get my head down, and I'll do this for 3 years, and then what will my next step be, and my next step. And I think, I don't want to say kids these days, because I always joke, but kids these days they're different. They don't need companies so much, and they don't need jobs. So it's interesting. Yes, I guess, to answer your question, when people come into this, yes, they probably do know what they're stepping into, and it is high performing. I think there is definitely a role for us and the leaders to play, to make sure that we are looking after people, yes, but I think in terms of how they own their own sacrifices, their own balances, we can provide the platform, but then it's up to them of how they take it. And I also, again, if I go back to kids, and I was the same, and I say kids, but people in their 20s and in the beginning of their career, they actually do want it all, and it is a bit different. And I used to, when I moved to London, I was partying every weekend, and then I would head to work on a Monday absolutely dead. But that was what I enjoyed, and that's what I wanted at that stage of life. So stages of life are different, and what you need as well. And I do think when you have had so much experience, and over the years your values don't change, but what you need from life and your balances change. And I think that is up to the individual to understand what they need.
Amazing. So, look, my expectation would be in any kind of high performance environment that the level of personal accountability would be extremely high. That if I were working for you, for example, that you would rightly expect me to take accountability for my own self, and that I would also have an expectation that you would want to know that I was doing what I need to do to take care of myself in order for me to perform. To be fair, I do just want to say, to be fair to the kids these days, I would just say we've seen in abundance that we're also not in a world anymore where the company will look after you for your whole life and give you a gold
True.
watch and a substantive retirement at the end. And so I feel like that whole model dynamic has changed in both directions. I do want to come back to the balance conversation. What I heard you say, and I heard you say this earlier, and then you just said it just now about these balances, the way, and again, the language only ever an imperfect map. And the way I'm hearing you use the word balance is not that I make sure to leave the office at 5 p.m. and to then, have dinner every night with my family and whatever. The way I heard you use the word balance is, what do I need to do to take care of myself so that I can perform at my best? Did I hear you correctly on that?
Totally. Like, again, the word balance for me is not about having it all. And
Yeah.
that's what the difference is. I don't go home every night, and I don't have dinner with my husband most nights during the week. We don't see each other. We catch up in the weekends. It's like, how's your life going? Oh, great. And I'm okay with that. And again, it's being okay. Again, it's making that active choice of what are you sacrificing and for what, and what drives you. And so I know that I will prefer to catch up on stuff at the end of the day so that I can go into the next day, because it will be, back to back meetings or whatever I've got going on. And I don't want that stress of I've got to catch up on that. And also, I don't want it eating into my weekend. So yes, we're always on in a weekend perspective, but I don't want to actively have to wake up and have to write that document or have to look at that. So again, for me, that's the balance. I'll make sure that I'll try and do everything I can during the week so that in the weekend I can wake up later or get that extra hour of sleep. And so that's what balance is for me. It's making those active choices of what am I sacrificing and prioritizing. And the prioritizing is, again, for me, about making sure that my mind is in a great mental state. And for that, it's about I'm looking after myself. I'm making sure I'm eating well. I'm prioritizing. So probably, actually, if you look at the word balance, it's not balance, it's prioritizing. What do I prioritize to allow myself to be at my best?
Yeah. It's interesting because this thing of those deliberate choices and that agency, I imagine that there would be people listening to this who go, oh, well, that's great for you, Julia George, and you, Kyla Colbin. You've got all sorts of privilege and choice, and you can find other jobs if you want. And some of us have to work 2 or 3 jobs or whatever just to pay the rent and put food on the table for the kids. And one of the things that happens when I talk to folks who are who feel stuck in their roles is that my invitation always is that we can go, what are my choices? Do I have a choice here to leave this job or not? Okay, if I leave the job, what would happen? I don't have any savings. Okay, I'd have to go stay at a friend's house, or I'd be living in my car. Okay, is that something that I'm willing to do or not? And in it, like, we always have choice, no matter how constrained our situation is. We might go, okay, so my choice is I'm actually going to stay in this shitty job that I'm miserable in, that doesn't pay me very well, because this is where I'm at right now. And in order for us to make those choices, we have to have total acceptance of the reality that we're in right now. And I just wanted to clarify that, because I feel like sometimes we think choice is a luxury that is only for, people who can decide to go and, have a different high flying role or whatever. And there's always choice, and the choice to accept the current situation and go, this is where I'm at right now, and this is what I'm going to put up with, and I'm just going to do this, is an absolutely valid choice, and one that gives people, I think, greater agency in their life as well. And you mentioned this thing of having agency being opening you up and making you free, those deliberate choices making you free.
Yeah, and I think you probably, when you're talking about those situations and those people, you're right. It probably feels like you don't have a choice, because you're stuck, and also your head's in a state, and you've got to understand that obviously mental health and that outlook is so important. And when you don't have that, and when you're really unhappy in your situation, and I've been there, like I've said, I've been in roles where I felt heavy, I felt like I'm stuck, and that clouds your judgment, because you don't think you have a choice, and you're stuck on this hamster wheel, and you're stressed, and you're paying the bills, and you're like, I can't. And so you don't feel like you have a choice. And it's true what you're saying. Of course you have a choice. Everyone does have a choice. You just have to work through those decisions. It's like everything, even in a breakup of a relationship, right? You feel like you might be stuck there. But actually, if you allow yourself to go, okay, this choice is going to be uncomfortable, really uncomfortable. And am I okay to have that discomfort, which might then get me somewhere else? But the unknown is so terrifying. And it's hard to make that choice when you're in that funk. So I completely can empathize being in that situation. I think it's almost, I think when I've been in those situations, it is almost like shutting off, trying to shut off that emotion and try and think very factually about it. It's life. Do you know what? Life, I always say this, and maybe it's my positiveness and my values, but I always say life has a way of working things out in the most basic sense, but it does. Because if you look back, and if I think everyone looks back at those really uncomfortable and difficult moments in their life where at that point you're going, this is hell. I'm so unhappy. I'm so uncomfortable. I don't know whether I'm going right or left. I don't know what decision to make. It's hard making decisions when you're in that state. And actually, when you look back, you go, I realize why I was put in that discomfort at that time. Oh, I learned that. And again, there was one of your previous questions around, okay, you're in a really stressful, high performing role now. It's probably arguably one of the most stressful positions that I've been in ever. But I don't feel that, because of the situations that I've been put in the past, and the past roles that I've had, and that discomfort and stress and feeling that, oh gosh, I couldn't make a decision. But all of that has actually helped me now, because I've gone through so much of those hard times and those difficult periods. This feels like a piece of cake, because you're like, oh, I'm stressed, and there's a decision to make, and this, and then you kind of look back and you go, but I've been through that. So actually, even if I make a wrong decision here, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to work out. And it takes a long time to get to that. And it takes going through the discomfort to get to that level of not, and I used it before, catastrophizing, because that is a natural, and I almost say it's, I know it's more natural for women. It is ruminating. And I think when you've gone through that and you realize that actually I can sit here and think about this over and over at night, and I can just sit in my mind and I can ruminate on it, or you have skills to go, I'm going to park that, move on. What's the worst that can happen? Oh, worst that can happen, maybe I might get fired from a job. Oh well, what will happen then? Okay, I'll find. So you sort of work through it. And I think, yes, I'm saying that in my situation, but I think anyone can work through that in their situation, but it's just going through that hardship to make that decision.
Amazing. We have just a few minutes, but I just want to touch on this. That practice of asking the literal, not rhetorical question, what is the worst that could happen, is such an important practice. And it comes from the Stoics, right? But this thing of going, actually, what is, I need to speak up to my boss and it's really scary. Okay, what is the worst that could happen? Well, my boss could yell at me. Okay, what would happen then? Well, I'd be upset. Okay, what would happen then? Well, my boss might fire me. Okay, what would happen then? And that literal playing out of it, to go all the way to the bitter end of the story, to go, okay, is that something I can accept or not? The monster in the closet is scary because it's vague. And as soon as we open the closet door and turn the light on, we go, oh, it's just a hat on a chair. Like now it's got definition. It's not scary anymore. And then we can decide, like, okay, do I want a hat on a chair or do I not want a hat on a chair? Right. Then that brings us to that place where we have that choice and that agency. And one of the things that for me has come through so clearly from this conversation is the value of agency, the value of authenticity. So the two big things that have stood out for me so far is the feeling that I have deliberate choice in any situation, even if I am structurally or positionally powerless, the feeling that I'm making deliberate choices, and the feeling that I am being able to be true to myself, how powerful those two things are. You mentioned it takes time to learn these things. So I just have one final question for you, which is, yes, it takes time. And also we always have people along the way who help us see things that we couldn't necessarily see ourselves. You mentioned a coach that you worked with. If you think of whether it's that coach or somebody else, is there somebody that you had a moment with where you go, oh my gosh, like that person helped me get such an epiphany? And if you could, if you think of one, if you could share, like, what was that experience? What did you learn?
So, oh gosh, there's been a few. I think definitely my coach has been amazing, just in terms of allowing me to understand me and allowing me to be myself, and also doing a lot of work on, like you said, what's the worst that's going to happen? You know, that is such a good practice to get into, because actually when you were saying, yes, you face it straight on, but then you see the reality, you're like, actually, is that really going to happen? The reality of that is probably pretty low, so I'm catastrophizing for no good reason. So someone who was really, I think, impactful in my life was my first boss when I moved to the UK. And it was in this agency that I said just really didn't feel like me. And what there was one moment which I'll say in a bit, but I think the overall piece that I learnt from her was that she was driven by ethos. That's how she wanted to lead. And that was the first I'd ever come across it. I was in my late 20s. It's the first place I'd worked outside of New Zealand, and I was struggling to find myself. And she really led by ethos, and she led by being her. And so I learned a lot from it. There was one moment, and this was a moment um, that probably helped me reflect a bit on who I am and what makes me tick. And I was obviously in a funk, and I'd been upset and unhappy about
I don't even remember what. She took me into a room and she said, Jules, you're just really grumpy. You're so grumpy. And it was just, that was all I needed. It was that one moment. And then I just thought, oh, wow, wow. And it made me reflect on actually me and how I am affects other people, and learning a lot around why and what made me, and and I think just understanding your emotions and everything. And I've always taken that with me throughout my life, because it's not grumpiness. I know, again, it's back to I'm passionate, and that's in my values. But that came across as being grumpy because I was really fixated on whatever it was. So I've taken that and I think learned how outwardly things can be perceived. So yeah, that was a moment. I laugh about it now, but
What a fantastic story. And, I've had similar stories, and I find that those people in our lives who invite us to be better, just what a gift those people are.
yeah.
And so with that, I just want to honor your former boss. Well done for that invitation to Julia to have this insight about herself. We are just about at the end of our time together. Julia, it's been such a delight talking to you. I have learned so much from this conversation. I feel so inspired about that ambition for success, and also that concept of using balance as a way to take care of ourselves so that we can be that hungry for success, the way you've talked about. I've loved every minute of this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's been amazing. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Please do let me know your feedback. You can reach me on hello@kylacolbin.com. One of my favorite parts of this conversation was actually the very beginning, when I asked her about wild ambition and fierce compassion, and she was like, compassion? Definitely not. That is not me. And then we got into it, and when we dug into what's important to us in terms of how we show up for the people around us, I felt like we were really actually on the same page. It was such a good reminder that our language is only ever an imperfect map, and how important it is to make sure we have a shared understanding of what we're talking about. Thanks again for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for my conversation with 4 times Olympic athlete and 1-time Olympic coach, Shay McAleese. Hunger and Heart is brought to you by the Crusaders Leadership Programme. Whether you're coaching under fives or a professional team, we all want the same thing: to build a culture of trust, to get the best out of your people, and to grow players into leaders. The Crusaders Leadership Program lets you get up close and personal with some of the greatest rugby legends of all time. People like Sir Wayne Smith, Sam Whitelock, Kieran Read. You'll connect with a global group of ambitious, caring coaches from a range of codes and backgrounds. And most importantly, you'll gain skills and techniques to drive impact and outcomes for your team. The Crusaders Leadership Program is a 2-week high-intensity virtual experience. It is delivered exclusively online, accessible from anywhere. Hunger and Heart listeners get 10% off the full price of the program. Use the code HUNGER at checkout. You can find out more about the Crusaders Leadership Program at crusadersleadership.com. That's crusadersleadership.com. Hunger and Heart is created by BOMA and the entire BOMA team, including Tito Bernal, Ray Jangle, Hannah Hudson, Johanna Coxon, Sunil Unka, and me, Kyla Colbin. Thanks for listening.